from West Virginia Public Broadcasting.
Support for the Legislature Today is provided by the following.
West Virginia University, online at wvu.edu. The High Technology Foundation, headquartered at the I-79 Technology Park in Fairmont, online at wvhtf.org.
At the legislature today, with 3 weeks left in this session, the Senate suspended the constitutional rule that bills be read on 3 separate days to quickly move legislation to the House. In the House, the Government Organization Committee has rejected a bill that would give county commissions the authority to pass smoking regulations. These stories and more legislative news coming up on the legislature today. Good evening, I'm Ashton Mara. After weeks of work, the Senate Education Committee passed out its final version of the bill to create charter schools in West Virginia. Here this evening to detail the bill and what happens next in the process to approve it is Senate Education Chair Senator Dave Seipolt of Preston County. This is his first year chairing the committee. Senator, thanks for coming back and joining us.
Thank you, Ashton, for the invitation.
So first, I would like to talk about slowing down the process. You all have taken 3 or 4 weeks to work through this bill. Why did you decide to do it?
Well, there was a couple reasons, and probably the most important was there was a discontinuity between the summer session, the interims, and the actual regular session. As you know, I'm a new chair, so we're starting at ground zero and bringing it up. There were no interim studies to draw on.
So this bill went from 21 pages as originally introduced to 56 pages now out of committee. And I know it's kind of a difficult question, but give us an overview. What does the charter school system in West Virginia look like according to this bill?
Well, let me address the number of pages first of all, and I don't want to be misleading on this, but as we worked through the process, we had to pull in sections of code which were not directly related to charter schools. For instance, Public Employees Insurance Agency. If we were to allow that to be offered to the teachers, we had to pull in that section of code. So there are several related sections of code which don't directly affect charter schools. But basically, charter schooling is an opportunity for flexibility. And the way a charter school is created is by a group of directors getting together and putting a business plan together and putting it forth to the county, to the County Board of Education, and who has the ultimate authority on whether to accept or reject that proposal. Now, there is an appeals process also. The charter has an opportunity to be flexible in the way they deliver education and in the way they put their programs together, possibly in length of day, in number of days, how they structure the classes and that sort of thing.
So there were concerns brought up by some of your committee members throughout the process, and I'd like to ask you about some of those concerns and see if they've been resolved. One of those was there was a concern that current public schools can petition to become a public charter school. But that leaves maybe students who go to that school who don't want to go to a charter school. Do they have an option? Can they opt out?
Yes, they can opt out. It is mandatory that when you convert an existing non-charter public school to a charter school, you must allow and accept all the students who are currently enrolled. However, if they want to go somewhere else, they certainly have that opportunity.
Is there a fix for students who go to a school that there's only one school in the county? Braxton County only has one high school. If Braxton County High School wants to be a charter school, is there an option for those students?
Well, I think that's why it's so important to have some local control and oversight. Obviously, a charter school won't work in every situation, and it was not intended to work in every situation. It's intended to work in situations where maybe children are not achieving like they should, and possibly the public non-charter school systems are not addressing their needs.
So the unions have also expressed some concerns over provisions in the bill, and one of those is that a teacher at a charter school is defined as an employee of that school instead of an employee of the county. That leaves some issues with seniority, with health insurance coverage, with retirement plans. What did you all do to address that question?
Well, actually, those questions were all addressed, and that's part of the reason why the bill grew to be 56 pages long. We specified that they are employees of the charter school. However, the chartering process will require that they are still public employees, that they still participate in PEIA, they still accrue their seniority, and they still accrue and contribute to the retirement system. So it's just like any other public employee, you know, except they're in the charter school.
So I'm sure there are still some concerns to be heard, but you requested that this bill go to the Senate Finance Committee. Originally, it was only coming to your committee. Why'd you make that request?
Well, I felt it was important because there is a money aspect to this. Obviously, we're moving funding around, although our goal from the very beginning was to have a zero fiscal impact. And that's how we crafted the bill, which is part of the reason why it took so long to come up with a final version. We worked very closely with the Department of Education and the finance people there who supplied the language which would keep the cost of a charter school as near as possible to that of a non-charter public school.
So the Finance Committee will take that bill up on Monday, and then we could see a vote as early as next week?
Quite possibly.
Okay. Senator David Seipolt, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, Ashton.
It's been said over and over again this session that the new Republican majority is doing all they can to speed up the legislative process. That commitment was proven on the Senate floor today as senators pushed through a marathon session, passing 21 bills to avoid weekend meetings. House Bill 2010 was one bill up for a final vote by members of the Senate. The bill creates the nonpartisan election of judges at all levels in West Virginia, from Supreme Court justices down to county magistrates. Senate Judiciary Chair Charles Trump says West Virginia is one of only 6 states in the country that still holds partisan judicial elections.
Mr. President, members of the Senate, this is a moment whose time has come. And I'm very happy. I think it's an extraordinarily positive step for West Virginia and its future. I contend, and I have contended for a very long time, that whether a person is a Republican or a Democrat, or a Whig or a Libertarian, or whatever, tells us really nothing about whether that person possesses the qualities and characteristics that we seek and desire in those who hold judicial office in West Virginia.
Senator Mike Woelfel, an attorney from Huntington, spoke in support of the bill, but Senator Mike Romano says whether there's an R or a D next to the judicial candidate's name on the ballot isn't the true issue.
What I do rise today is to urge that this body consider public financing for our judges in the future. It's an issue whose time has come. All we have guaranteed by going to nonpartisan judges is that we're going to elect the judiciary with a much shorter time period to get to know the candidate, and that many of our judges will be elected by a plurality, probably often less than 20% of the voting public and probably far less than that of registered voters. Again, the time has come to look at public financing for our judges. It's worked well in our Supreme Court, and it does take some of the influence of big money out of the most important office in our state.
Members of the chamber approved the bill 33-1. Senator Ron Miller voted against the bill, he says, because a judge in his district strongly opposed it. The bill now goes back to the House for members to consider some Senate amendments.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the constitutional rule requiring a bill be read on 3 separate days be suspended.
Senate Majority Leader Mitch Carmichael made that motion more than a dozen times as senators pushed all of the bills on second reading to third reading and put them to a vote. They started by considering Senate Bill 30, a bill that would allow a person with any share in ownership of a cow or herd to consume raw milk. The product would not be eligible for commercial sale under the legislation, but that didn't stop many senators from sharing their concerns, including Senator Ron Stallings, who practices medicine in Boone County.
I'll rise in opposition to this bill, speaking from a pure public health issue. There's not a whole lot of outbreaks, but there are outbreaks.
Stallings says there were 121 disease outbreaks related to raw milk recorded between 1993 and 2006, an average of 13.5 per year. Senator Ron Miller, the former Agriculture Committee chair, also opposed the bill. The committee heard from stakeholders during summer interim meetings concerning the legislation, including from a West Virginia dairy farmer.
This dairy farmer, who is a commercial organic dairy farmer, he makes his living doing this, he raises his family doing this, was opposed to raw milk sales. He was opposed because he knew one outbreak One outbreak could destroy the dairy industry. I've also received word from other dairy organizations on the East Coast who have problems with this piece of legislation.
But newly elected Republican Senator Robert Karnes says the consumption of raw milk is an issue of economic and personal freedom.
The question as to whether or not there is any danger associated with drinking raw milk, of course there's some slight risk associated with drinking raw milk, and the risk is extremely slight. According to the CDC, in 25 years, there are roughly 10 million regular consumers of raw milk. In 25 years, there have been 7 deaths associated with drinking raw milk.
The bill was approved 18-16, but not necessarily on party lines. Democratic Senator Bob Williams joined the Republicans in support of the legislation, while Republican Senator Tom Takubo, a physician, voted against it. Coming up, we'll check in with 2 of our colleagues from the Capitol Press Corps about the issues they've been covering this week. First, here's a look at some of the bills introduced in the Senate today.
Among the bills introduced in the Senate today, Senate Bill 527 to eliminate the requirement that the Commissioner of Agriculture be a practical farmer, learned in the science of agriculture, and have made agriculture his or her chief business for 10 years immediately preceding election. Senate Bill 528 to create the Earned Sick Time Act. The bill requires employers to provide paid sick leave. Senate Bill 531 to increase the cigarette tax incrementally by a total of $1 per pack in order to fund substance abuse and workforce development initiatives. Senate Bill 536 to expand the definition of kidnapping to include taking or gaining custody of, confining or concealing another person by force, duress, fraud, deceit, misrepresentation, or enticement. There are no bills up for passage in the Senate on Monday. Among the bills on second reading, Senate Bill 283 to simplify the process by which a bank may adjust the hours of operation for branch offices, and Senate Bill 370, the governor's bill to codify and reorganize existing committees and subcommittees relating to the Governor's Committee on Crime, Delinquency, and Prevention.
It was Tobacco-Free Day at the Capitol today, and coincidentally, the House Government Organization Committee spent the day discussing a bill about smoking. The committee held a public hearing this morning on House Bill 2008, which would take the power to approve public smoking regulations from the appointed county health boards and put it back in the hands of elected county officials. The bill stirred plenty of emotions from the nearly 30 people who spoke about it at the hearing, but the committee considered the bill later in a later meeting. They looked at limiting the authority even commissioners would have. Liz McCormick reports.
Only one speaker expressed support for the bill. Kenny Smith with the American Legion says putting restrictions on veterans who want to be able to go inside certain places and smoke isn't fair.
We are obligated to tell a man or a woman serving in the United States services under the age of 21 he may not consume alcohol within our fraternal organizations. However, this ship has sailed and it is accepted by this generation. We are now telling these same men and women they no longer enjoy the freedom of smoking within our walls as well. To this extent, what freedoms will be taken next?
Donna Gianluca with the Hancock County Health Department couldn't understand why smoking was not deemed a public health issue in the introduced version of the bill.
51 years ago, the Surgeon General's report already sounded an alarm, saying the dangers of smoking and how bad they are for us. Moving forward, secondhand smoke has also been a leading cause of cancer among non-smokers in particular. So again, I ask this question of you. How can a legislation define smoking as not a part of public health?
After the public hearing ended, the Government Organization Committee began to discuss the bill. Delegate Isaac Spinagle, a Democrat from Pendleton County, was the first one to point out that members were no longer looking at the introduced version of the bill, but instead at a committee substitute. The committee substitute no longer restricts smoking regulations to only the county commission, but instead makes it so the commission only has authority over regulations at casinos and video lottery sites. The smoking regulations set down already by each county's public health board would remain the same as before. Delegate Spinagle was curious if the county commission even wanted the authority of regulating public smoking at these sites. Jack Woodrum with the Summers County Commission spoke on behalf of the commission and says there are language issues with the bill that concern him.
Familiar with this bill or had an opportunity to review it?
This version is something we've just seen this morning.
The committee substitute?
Yes.
Do the county commissioners generally have a consensus whether or not they want this bill from your meeting or your?
Well, we see no point in involving the county commission in it. The boards of health have taken care of this for a number of years, and it has stood up to judicial review.
Okay. Do you is the county commission requesting to have this legal authority over the boards of health?
No, we are not.
You don't want it?
No, sir. We are not opposed to making decisions. However, this is not a decision as it is written. There are no standards for us to measure their request against. If you provide us with a standard, we could certainly make that decision.
The committee continued to discuss the bill, questioning counsel and Woodrum on the issues of liability in the current language, of safety, and of health. But in the end, House Bill 2208, allowing county commissioners to decide if smoking would be permitted at casinos and video lottery establishments, was rejected. For West Virginia Public Broadcasting, I'm Liz McCormick in the House.
Lawmakers wrapped up another busy week today with plans for some committees to continue their work over the weekend. Here to review the top stories of the week and preview what's still to come are two members of the Capitol Press Corps. Joel Ebert is the State House reporter for the Charleston Daily Mail, and Pam Pritt covers the legislature for the Beckley Register-Herald. Thank you guys for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us. So let's start with a bill that was supposed to be on the agenda today in the Senate Judiciary Committee. This bill allows anybody over the age of 21 to carry a concealed weapon without a permit. Joel, you went to that meeting. What happened?
It was basically pulled from the agenda. I talked to Senator Trump, and he's the chair of the Judiciary Committee. And basically he had said that there were still some issues that he wanted to hear from people. There's been some advocacy groups that have been robocalling members of the Judiciary Committee. So there are interested sides on this, both for and against the bill. And I think Trump just wanted to hear, a little bit more about it. He didn't indicate if it's going to be on Sunday's agenda, because they are going to meet on Sunday evening, though.
But he didn't say we're going to take this bill off altogether.
No, it doesn't sound like it's going to be completely removed. It just sounds like it's been pushed back to a later date.
Okay, so Pam, yesterday you covered a House Health Committee meeting. You've been following a bill closely that would drug test people who receive TANF benefits. These are basically benefits for low-income families. What did the Health Committee do?
Well, they passed the bill out of committee last night after their evening floor session. A public hearing yesterday morning, about 7 people spoke, none in favor of the bill, which has the unintended consequence, I believe, of allowing felons to receive TANF benefits, which is against federal law.
I talked to Delegate Pushkin. He brought that up this morning, saying this bill is trying to supersede something that the federal government is saying. The federal government says if you're a convicted felon, you don't get TANF benefits. But this says if you're a convicted felon and you pass a drug test, then you're eligible.
That's correct.
So the Senate Judiciary Committee has considered the Pain-Capable Unborn Child Protection Act. That's a bill that we've been following closely. They approved it yesterday, but the Democrats did try to make some amendments in that committee. Joel, what did they try to do?
The main ones that you always hear, there was a push to insert exceptions for cases of rape and incest. There was another one that basically tried to delay the timing of it. They wanted it to be 24 weeks. That was one that Senator Palumbo tried to advance. And then there was just another one that was really trying to clean out some of the penalties that are in the bill right now. All of the efforts, 4 of them in total, all failed. They were all put forward by Democrats and pretty much fell along party lines. So.
We should say that those penalties are for medical professionals who perform the abortions. Pam, this bill is a 22-week ban. Last year they passed a 20-week ban. But do you expect to see the Senate pass this bill when they get it, I think, probably Wednesday?
I do. I think that there was pretty passionate debate on the floor last year, and I think with the Republican majority in the Senate now, I'm pretty sure that bill will pass.
It'll be interesting, I think, to watch, because the Democrats who voted for the bill last year Jeff Kessler being one of them, are now so backing their party. Now that they're in the minority, they're so willing to fight for democratic issues. That'll be an interesting one to watch and see how the discussion goes.
Yes, it will.
Go ahead.
And the governor vetoed that bill last year, and his communications director has said that he'll veto it again. So I think this one's going to end up in the courts.
Well, and it's also interesting because I was talking to Senator Kessler about it today, and he says that he's not really sure which way he's going to fall on it, but he did indicate he voted in favor of last year's, so he thinks he'll probably support this year's as well. So it'll be interesting to see how it plays out on the floor.
For me, it always comes back to Senator Palumbo and how good he is at making the argument that this bill is not constitutional and it will not get the approval of the courts. So I'll be interested to see if he has something to stand up and say. We saw Senator Trump say earlier this week that we should respect the senator from the 17th's opinion on some other bills. So that one will be an interesting conversation. We saw this in a story earlier, but today the Senate passed the raw milk bill. Pam, you've been following that one through. They took it through the interim committee process over the summer. Surprised by the discussion?
Not at all. The discussion today closely mirrored what they talked about in committee earlier this week, with concerns brought up, health concerns brought up about communicable diseases like E. coli and listeria by the doctors on the committee, Dr. Stallings and Dr. Takubo, and then Senator Carnes saying that this was about personal freedom and economics.
Joel, you talked to Takubo today, the sole Republican to vote against the bill. What did he have to say about his vote?
He basically said that he would have approved of the bill, but he had some concerns that there weren't enough regulations of it. He was hoping that there could have been more rules set forth by, say, the Department of Agriculture. And you know, it was interesting because he actually voted in favor of the amendment which allowed herd share agreements. That's what the bill ultimately comes to. But once again voted against this bill. But basically his explanation was he wanted some tighter regulation on it.
Okay. Well, Pam Pritt, Joel Ebert, thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Now here's a look at some of the bills introduced in the House today.
Among the bills introduced in the House today, House Bill 2840 to provide an alternate means for students to make up lost instructional days by allowing county boards of education to distribute lessons on the Internet. House Bill 2849 to create the West Virginia Sentencing Commission to research issues regarding sentencing in order to promote a fuller understanding of the efficient, just, and fair operation of the state's criminal justice system. House Bill 2855 to provide for a death penalty and automatic review of the penalty for commission of murder in the first degree. House Bill 2868 to prohibit the act of knowingly housing a drug trafficker and to disqualify the offender from receiving public assistance. House Bill 2873 creating and maintaining a searchable online budget database to easily access the details on how the state is spending tax dollars and what performance results are achieved for those expenditures. Up for passage, Senate Bill 302 to add the West Virginia Municipal Police Officers and Firefighters Retirement System to the definition of retirement plan as it relates to disqualification for public retirement benefits. House Bill 2139 to restart expired provisions that allow retired teachers to be employed as substitutes in areas of critical need. House Bill 2140 requires the Board of Education of a county that has been taken over by the State Board of Education to establish goals and action plans for improvement to end intervention within 5 years. If after 5 years the county board is still not ready, the State Board must hold a public hearing in the county so that the reasons for continued intervention and concerns of citizens may be heard. House Bill 2187 to allow government buildings to display the American national motto, "In God We Trust." Costs associated with the display may be paid for with any private donations, gifts, grants, and bequests received by the governing authority. House Bill 2432, allowing persons convicted of a felony to become a pharmacist 5 years after the conviction, as long as the crime was not related to the sale of controlled substances. House Bill 2669 to eliminate the statutory requirements for tuberculosis testing for school children and school personnel who are at low risk for tuberculosis. On second reading, House Bill 2457, prohibiting the use of the name or likeness of elected or appointed officials on publicly owned vehicles. The bill also prohibits public officials from purchasing and distributing trinkets with their name on them. And House Bill 2733, removing some drugs containing hydrocodone from the Schedule III list of controlled substances.
This has been the Legislature Today. We'll be back on Monday with all of the legislative news from the state capitol. I'm Ashton Mara. Thanks for joining us. Good night.
Support for the Legislature Today is provided by the following.
West Virginia University, online at wvu.edu. The High Technology Foundation, headquartered at the I-79 Technology Park in Fairmont, online at wvhtf.org.